was only true in fairy tales, and for someone else, but not for me. Our love was out to get me, that's the way it seemed. Disappointment haunted all my dreams. Then I saw her face, now I'm a believer. Not a trace of doubt in my mind. I'm in love, I'm a believer. I couldn't leave her if I tried. I thought love was more or less a given thing. Seems the more I gave, the less I got. What's the use in trying? All you get is pain. When I needed sunshine, I got rain. Then I saw her face, now I'm a believer. Not a trace of doubt in my mind. I'm in love, I'm a believer. I couldn't leave her if I tried. Love was out to get me. Now that's the way it seemed. Disappointment haunted all my dreams. Then I saw her face, now I'm a believer. Not a trace of doubt in my mind. I'm in love, I'm a believer. I couldn't leave her if I tried. Yes, I saw her face, now I'm a believer. Not a trace of doubt in my mind. But I'm a believer, yeah, 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 yeah.
Hello, New York City Transit community, and welcome to the review of the 1964 through 1965 Budd R32 subway cars. The R32 was a New York City subway car model built by the Budd Company from 1964 to 1965 for the IND/BMTB division. A total of 600 R32s were built, numbered from 3350 to 3949, though some cars were renumbered. The R32 contract was divided into two subcontracts of 300 cars each. The R32 standards were numbered from 3350 to 3649, and the R32A variants numbered from 3650 through 3949. The former was paid by the city's capital budget, and the latter was paid through a revenue bond. All were arranged as Mary pairs. The R32s were the first mass-produced stainless steel cars built for New York City subway. In June 1963, the New York City Transit Authority contracted with Budd for 600 IND/BMT cars within 300 pairs to replace older equipment cars that exceeded the TA's 35-year limit of age, including the BMT D-type triplex articulated cars and some of the BMT standards. At the time, this was the largest rail car order ever placed in the United States for subway cars. The cars were ordered for $68,820,000, of which half was provided by New York City and half through the sales of bonds by New York City Transit Authority. Budd had bid on a previous contract with the New York City Transit Authority, but had never won a city contract for a production run of cars until the R32s, as Budd built only stainless steel equipments, and the TA refused to allow a differential in competitive bids for this higher quality construction. Eventually, Budd won the contract by offering the lowest bid of $114,700 per car. The bidder came in at $117,900 per car, which was for low alloy steel cars. Budd introduced stainless steel equipment to the modern New York City subway system, a plan that was met with limited success. New York City Transit Authority allowed a premium for subsequent stainless steel contracts, and all subsequent equipment was at least partly constructed of stainless steel. However, the Budd Company was never benefit from the change, as they failed to win further contracts from the New York City Transit Authority, and the company has since halted the production of railroad cars. The R32s originally came with blue passenger doors and blue storm doors. The passenger doors of many cars were painted silver from 1974 as the graffiti epidemic worsened. However, some cars retained or regained blue passenger doors towards the start of the general overhaul program, which replaced all the doors with stainless steel versions. On August 18th of 1964, the New York City Transit Authority approved a modification to the 300 R32s already constructed. The modification was required to ensure proper clearance in tunnels. Since the cars were 4,000 pounds lighter than the other subway cars when they were new, they did not sink as low on standard trucks and springs. The modification involved the modification of the body bolster. Then a ceremonial introduction trip for the R32 Brightliners was held on September 9, 1964, operating from the New York Central Railroad's Mott Haven yards in the Bronx to Grand Central Terminal in Midtown Manhattan. The new cars were then placed into service on the queue on September 14, 1964, after New York Central Spring loaded under the third rail shoes were replaced with gravity-type overrunning subway third rail shoes. The R32s were originally assigned to the BMT Southern Division service only, initially on the Brighton Line Q train and the C Beach line known as the N train today, but were eventually reassigned to the West End line T and double T trains. Cars 3946 to 3949 were delivered with Pioneer trucks and disc brakes in 1966. These trucks were replaced with standard trucks in 1976. In 1974, cars 3700 to 3701 were sent to Garrett AI research facilities in Los Angeles, California to test out flywheel energy storage system equipment. 3700 received energy conservation machinery with batteries and amper-type digital readout indicating the amount of energy used by the equipment, while 3701 remained unmodified. These cars were later tested at the UMTA and the U.S. Department of Transportation's testing facilities in Pueblo, Colorado for evaluation, and were returned to the MTA in 1976 for in-service testing on all BMT/IND lines to check the effectiveness of the technology. From 1988 to 1990, as part of New York City Transit Authority General Overhaul Program, the R32 cars were rebuilt. Only 10 cars were rebuilt by General Electric at its facility in Buffalo, New York. Cars 3594 to 3595, 3880 to 3881, 3892 to 3893, 3936, 3937, and 3934, 3935 as prototype rebuilds, and the remaining cars were rebuilt by Morrison Knudsen at its facility in Hornell, New York. During the rebuilding process, the route and destination miler road signs located above the storm doors were removed and replaced with illuminated flipped-out electronic route signs that can display both letters and numbers, including 0 to 9. This is because the air conditioning evaporators mounted on the interior car ends made it difficult to change the front route and destination signs. The distinctive EXP, known as Express, and local marker lights were also removed. The road signs on the sides of the car were updated and retained. After refurbishment, the R32 and its A variant cars were renamed R32 Phase 1, R32 Phase 2, and R32 GE. The R32 Phase 1 cars, rebuilt by Morrison Knudsen, had WABCO air brake packages, GE master controllers, and Thermo King HVAC units. The R32 Phase 2 cars, also rebuilt by Morrison Knudsen, had New York air brake equipment, Westinghouse master controllers, and Stone Safety HVAC units. The 10 prototype rebuilt R32 GE cars differ from the Phase 1 and Phase 2 cars as they were rebuilt to R38 specifications. They had experimental Sigma HVAC units powered by AC motors and solid-state inverters. Original traction motors rebuilt to 115 horsepower instead of the traditional 100 horsepower units, backlit ad signs, and different bulkhead designs. Since the cars were sent out to be overhauled based on how poorly they were performing, worse first, they were R32s and R32As rebuilt in both Phase 1 and Phase 2 configurations. There were also about a dozen or more pairs that are composed of R32s and R32A mixes. Now moving on to the Powertrain is that most units as the Phase 1 and Phase 2 had signified the use of the DC propulsion system and Westinghouse 1447JR traction motors. However, 10 GE variants were later equipped with the GE 1257E1 motors along with the GE SCM propulsion system. And here's how they sound. Since the introduction of this set, they started to run the Q train line in 3 variants. The Q, QT, and QB lines were their first presence. And since the opening of Crescent Street Connection, they also ran the AA, B, D, N, and TT routes. By 1977, some of the sets were transferred to Jamaica Yard for the E, F, GG, and N lines. The rest stayed in the Coney Island Yard for the R train service. In 1987, the BDK, that was formerly known as the AA, GG known as today's G line, N train, Q, and the M lines. And in 1990 through 1995, the R32 sets ran the Franklin Avenue shuttle lines as well. Then, the R32s were transferred out of the G line to be running the E and F lines. In 1998, the sets were later moved to the C, E, N, and R lines. And more sets were sent to work with the temporary 63rd Street shuttle line. This line was in service from February to October 1998. By mid-2000s, the next set were thrown into working on the A, the W at one point, and the increasing times of service on the F line. In 2007, the first phase of retirement had commenced. This retirement was caused by the introduction of the Alstom R160s built in 2005. So at Jamaica Yard, many R32s were retired or transferred, causing a complete absence on the E and F train line. Most sets that aren't retired were plugged into the A and C and the B line for one set. Plus, a very special line of the V had the appearance of the R32s until they were all retired. And those R32s that retired were the Phase 1, 2, and GE variants. And since those are retired and the discontinuation of the V line by 2010, all remaining R32s that were still in service only ran the C line. And in December 2011 through December 2012, 200 of these cars were sent to work on the A line to reduce their underground tunnel times. And in October 2012, as the result of Hurricane Sandy damage to the Rockaways, some R32s were sent to another area of the Rockaways in the zone of Far Rockaway and the Beach 90th Streets, because the corridor between Rockaway Park and JFK was disfigured from that disaster. And a special line of the H train that ran service from 2012 through May 2013 with the R32s. Plus, other sets of these ran the Rockaway shuttle for a few summer seasons. After the damaged Rockaway line corridor was fixed, the service returned with the R32s by 2013. And in the summer of 2013, the R32s were transferred from the C to the J and Z lines that was rostering out of East New York Yard. This transfer causes an idea to swap the R32s for the R160s, and these R160s running on the C, J, and Z were so rare, and one R32 was preserved in the East New York Yard for the J and Z service. And besides, the R143 as the older siblings of the R160s were most commonly running on the J as well. However, in 2015, the R32 and R160 swap became permanent, which helped reduce the failures and criticisms of the R32s. And when the C line is completely underground, air conditioning is the key to having newer cars on the line. Whereas, in the summer, when the subway gets hotter, the R160s provide air conditioning in advance. And with the R32s on the A line, 34% of its corridor into Lefferts, Ozone Park, or Far Rockaway are elevated above ground. So the AC isn't an issue with the windows being open. In December 2017, the R160's newer cousins were introduced, and those were the R179s from Bombardier. And since they started service, they ran the A, C, and half sets were running on the J and Z lines. And since these new deliveries came, the R32s on the J and Z lines were split between the A and C lines. But the R32 still run the C mostly like usual. By April 2020, most R32s were removed from service temporarily because of the COVID-19 pandemic and quarantine influencing the safety checks. So the R179s had to take coverage for these classic trains from January that same year when their delivery was complete. Eventually, 2 months after, by June 2020, the R32s had to be woken up to come back into service because of the R179s being grounded for the third time due to one set being detached on the A train line. And after over 3 months of the R179 maintenance solution, by September, they returned to service, helping the R32s continue their retirement after 56 years. And majority of these retiring were transferred from East New York Yard and the 27th Street Yard to the Pitkin Yard for a farewell storage. And one set of these cars were taken to the Canarsie Yard for an isolated storage as well. But the retirement wasn't complete without a farewell sensation. Now, moving on to the resolution. These R32s were known to be named the Brightliners. They were the most unique classic steel-made subway cars to conquer through long miles and miseries during their 58 years of servicing New Yorkers. And I recall that I was riding these subway cars since I was 7 years old in 2011, only on the C train line. I remember taking these to Rockaway Avenue at first, and in any station in Manhattan from Utica Avenue as a child. Since I was little, these trains were my most disliked subway cars. Why, you may ask? Because it was the design that bothered me in disgust. I like it when it was stainless steel, but its texture on the body, the headlights on each end of the car, the low quality flip dot signs, the manual announcement features as conductor operated, and the destination row signs arrangements were so unappreciative. Except I only liked the speed it performed. These subway cars were the most unusual to me, and I used to wish they were gone already. And the last time I remember riding these in revenue service was June 2019 on the C train line. And my whole life is riding these trains on the C and seeing them on this same line while waiting for another train. And besides, I had always wondered when the C train line and its yard would get another train. But at rare times like July 4th, 2012, I rode an R46 on the C with my dad to the Port Authority bus terminal. And until 2019, it was my first year riding the R179s that became usual on the C and also for the A train line already implemented, as how I like it. Despite their considerable structural quality, the R32 suffered from low mechanical quality, especially near their end of their service lives. Others, like myself, criticized the R32s for their appearance and lack of comfort. They had worn out air conditioning, propulsion, and braking systems, so they were often temporarily transferred to services with mostly outdoors or elevated portions, namely the A, J, and Z lines, as I already mentioned already. But suddenly, since late 2020, these trains have grown on me as the most appreciated and vulnerable classics of the subway fleet I liked for the first time. During my past experiences with these trains, I didn't realize many had retirements a decade ago. The R160s replaced most of the R32s in late 2000s. The 10G General Electric cars were retired first in the summer 2007. The Phase 2 R32s followed a year later from March 2008 until October 13, 2008. Finally, a handful of Phase 1 R32s were retired from early 2009 until November 2009, when it was decided to retire the New York City Transit R44s instead. By December 2010, only 232 active cars remained, 222 of which were assigned to the 207th Street Yard operating on the A and C lines. These had periodically undergone intermittent SMS, known as scheduled maintenance service, a life extension program cycles at a cost of $25 million to extend their useful lives. Most cars retired by the R160s were stripped and sunk as artificial reefs from the boats. However, after the reefing program ended in April 2010, retired R32s, as the rest of them have trucked to Sims Metal Management's Newark facility in New Jersey to be scrapped and processed, an action that occurred between April 2013 and October 2013 with several already retired cars, and was expected to occur with the cars retired by R179's delivery in progress. And we also had preservations, which were the Phase 2 pair, 3350 to 3351, set aside for preservation by the Railway Preservation Corporation. This pair is currently stored at the Coney Island complex. The General Electric rebuilt pairs, 3594 to 3595, being used as NYPD training cars at Floyd Bennett Field. Phase 1 pair, 3786 to 3787, being used as derailment, re-railing training cars at the Coney Island complex. Back to this decade since 2020, after a year in storage, the R32s were officially retired when the last train made final runs in December 2021 and January 2022 as part of a series of farewell trips organized by the New York Transit Museum on 4 consecutive Sundays. On December 19th and 26th, 2021, and January 2nd, 2022, it ran the D and F lines. And on January 9th, it ran the Q train line as it did back in 1964. Phase 2 pair 3352 to 3353 set aside for preservation by the New York Transit Museum, and they were overhauled and remodified into its 1960s era scheme, then coupled into the rest of the regular refurbished Phase 2 cars that were running the retirement for 3 Sundays until January 2nd. I, as Cedric, attended the retirement ceremony run on January 9th. I waited about 3 minutes at Church Avenue until the train came to pick me up at 10:13 a.m. While riding the train, I moved from car to car to get to see many subway fans bunching the whole ride. I rode this train all the way to 96th Street at the line's usual last stop, and after we departed from that station going back, I rode this train to 14th Street Union Square to get off at 11:18 in the morning to catch the L train to Canarsie. That ride was extremely satisfying, except for a crowd attending a train event like this since the Parade of Trains in September 2019. And after 7 p.m. that day on January 9th, the R32 era officially ended after 57 years. After 4 days since, one set of the R32s moved away from the Canarsie Yard at nighttime. Until today, one set of another one was left if it can be transferred for scrap. So since the retirement was concluded, these Brightliners are 100% done, but will never be forgotten as the MTA's first durable stainless steel cars from Budd Corporation in Philadelphia. So the rate that it had was 8.7 out of 10. So thank you guys for watching. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and let us rest in peace to the R32s since their service in 1964. And also, Happy New Year's and long live your memories of these classic Brightliners.
Don't know much about history, don't know much biology, don't know much about a science book, Don't know much about the French I took, but I do know that I love you. And I know that if you love me too, what a wonderful world this would be. Don't know much about geography, don't know much trigonometry, don't know much about algebra, don't know what a sliding rule is for, but I do know 1 and 1 is 2. And if this one could be with you, what a wonderful world this would be. Now I don't claim to be an A student, but I'm trying to be. For maybe by being an A student, baby, I can win your love for me. Don't know much about history, don't know much biology, don't know much about a science book, don't know much about the French I took, but I do know that I love you. And I know that if you love me too, what a wonderful world this would be. La ta 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 ta. History, biology, well, la ta 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 ta. Science book, French I took, yeah, but I do know that I love you. And I know that if you love me too, what a wonderful world this would be.